We have a question from Brother Moses of Mexico. Let's see what he says. He asks, Venerable Sheikh Qomi, why did Allah allow the wicked to retain the dominion of the Imam instead of the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad? But does sadness not serve the dark side? A very good question. Two questions. Does crying lead us to the negative and dark side? That is what we are going to answer. We have two types of sadness. One type that leads to hopelessness and demotivation, which is dark and associated with Satan, because everything that is of hopelessness is from Satan. You see it when a person starts to be ungrateful to God, begins to complain, and starts to reject. Then they cry and insult God. Why have you taken my mother? That is dark. In turn, it is dark. That is wrong. It is forbidden in the Imam. It is not allowed for a person to start complaining against God. We leave that aside. We do not have just one type of crying or only one kind of weeping. The crying of ingratitude, of complaint is dark. It is not good. But there is a type of crying that accompanies the truth. For example, when a person is praying, in a very deep spiritual state of love, they cry, and that is dark. No, it is not dark at all. It is the weeping of much hope, of much love. That is a way to express love. When you cry expressing your love for God, it is perfect. When you cry expressing your love for Jesus, for the Prophet Muhammad, for Imam Husain, it is perfect. That weeping is not of ingratitude that is dark. It is a weeping of great faith, of great blessing. It is a way to express love for Imam Husain. Therefore, it is very blessed. It is very good. That weeping is of salvation, for it is a weeping of pure light, of pure hope. Therefore, after crying for Imam Husain, you feel relieved. You feel happy, relieved of sins, because it takes you from darkness to light. What the Holy Quran says is that God is the Lord of the believers, saving them from darkness and leading them to light. And the weeping for Imam Husain has that benefit. The next question that the brother asked is, why did God allow the wicked to come to power in the Imam? The Umayyads, the Caliphs, the Abbasids, and today the Saudi Arabians. Why does God allow this? Let's see. There are two ways that God acts, through miracles and through believers. This means that the power of God reaches the earth in two ways, through miracles. As we see, for example, in the time of the Prophet Solomon, that the government of Prophet Solomon was by the miracle of Allah. Prophet Solomon dominated the animals, the seas, everything. Everything was under the power of Prophet Solomon. The demons were imprisoned, chained by a miracle of Allah. But let's see, does God want governance on earth in that way? The answer is no. There is another form of power that comes from the believers. It comes from the people. When the believers reach that certainty, that faith, to stand by their prophet, by their imam, to fight and be willing to give their lives for the cause of truth, then they will deserve to inherit power. So, who comes to command? Those who resist, those who have power. This is what God says in the Holy Quran. All the prophets have come to awaken the consciousness of the believers, so that the believers fight, so that the believers are awake, so that the believers resist. This is the way that God has decided on earth, that believers rise up against the oppressors. But what happens if people are so corrupt in such darkness? Those who do not want to rise will leave the prophet alone. They will leave that imam alone, and the wicked will martyr him. What happened to the prophet Zechariah and the prophet John the Baptist is that they were killed by the Pharisees. What happened to St. Peter, who was killed by the wicked? What happened with Jesus, who they wanted to kill, is that if Jesus had enough companions among the Jews, there would be no need for God to save him. What happened to the prophet Moses, who died in solitude when they abandoned Moses? Then the children of Israel betrayed Moses, abandoned him, and said they would not fight against the Canaanites. So Moses was left alone. So when they leave a man of God alone, the enemies martyr him, and it will be a lesson for the believers. They must rise up. The Holy Quran says God will not change. God will not perform a miracle. God will not change the destiny of a people. God will not change your destiny with supplication. This is how you will cry in the house and leave the oppressor, letting them take the government. No, God will not save you from that. That supplication God will not answer. But if a person is a believer who fights against the oppressor, then he will. That believer makes the supplication, God will save him. The Palestinians resist against Israel, they make the supplication, and that supplication is indeed answered. But if you sleep in your homes and say, "Oh God, save us from the Israeli oppressor," God is not going to save you. Is that clear enough? It means that the way God acts on earth is that He says you have to take the first step, raising your voice against the oppressor, standing up. And then God responds to your plea. God helps you. The help of God comes afterward, in support of Allah and in support of the oppressed. After you assist God, rise against the oppressor, and the victory of God will come. Then, when the believers abandoned Limon, it means they became corrupt. They have become corrupt. When they become corrupt, then they deserve to be lost. So, are they going to martyr Imam Husain? In the following talk, we will explain how the community of the Prophet and the Imam becomes corrupted. It reaches a point where the very community of Muslims kills and dismembers the grandson of the Prophet and the Imam. How can they be so wicked? How were the Pharisees, the Israelites, the children of the prophets, a descendant of the blessed prophets? How do they become such wicked Pharisees that they kill many prophets and persecute Jesus and want to kill Jesus? How does a human being reach that we can say degeneration? Due to sin. Then God will not save a people. Rather, they themselves must rise up. God will not change the destiny of a people until they decide to change their destiny. That is the rule of God. When Jesus comes to earth to save us, when we decide, when we rise up against the oppressors, when we raise our voices saying no to the oppressors, as the Islamic Revolution did in Israel, as the people of Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq did, raising their voices against Israel. When a people do this, God will grant them blessings and save them. But the people of Kufa abandoned Imam Husain and became corrupt, falling into sin. Thus, they received the curse and were lost.